Firemark and the awesome Gordon Firemark. And this is Fuzzy Lawgic, and we're here to talk about privacy today. Bree, run that first clip, please. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fridays. Everybody got their coffee ready? It feels like a coffee heavy day for me, at least. I'm already like my second pot in.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm done with my coffee too. It's in my belly.
Yes, mine was a long time ago. I had some fun with that video, though. And to jump right into it, one of the things I was doing this morning was editing a little bit of video from Gordon. Gordon, you are live at Podcast Movement Evolutions in Vegas. Is that right? How are things there on the ground? Tell us what you're seeing, what you're hearing, how it's going.
I am. Well, first of all, I want to say a big thanks to the folks at Podbean. They've let me jump on the Wi-Fi that they purchased for their special stuff at the booth. And here I'm on the show floor, at the expo floor, just doing my thing. And it's been a great conference. I gave my talks yesterday and had good response and all that. It's really interesting that everybody's talking about AI. There's AI companies here. There's editors are worried about AI taking over their jobs. The writers have already worried about it. It's just one thing after another. The ad tech folks, that's another big hot topic, evolution of ad tech in the podcasting space. The message seems to be that no, the sky in podcasting is not falling, which is good news. The Ambi Awards was held on Tuesday night, and it was really a fun award show. That's the Podcast Academy, which is sort of the move toward professional podcasting, and they put on a great awards show. It felt to me like the awards were a little heavy in the direction of the podcasts run by the big networks, the Spotify's, the Amazons, the iHearts, and they did have a couple of categories that were more for the independents, but it's interesting to see what's happening as this industry evolves. And fiction podcasting is a big talk. There's a lot of fiction and scripted narrative kind of folks here, and they're talking a great game, so it's good. Yeah.
That's awesome. And the cool thing I'll say about that is that kind of is neat with what we talk about here each Friday with Fuzzy Lawgic, because calling it fiction is something we haven't even touched on, and it's probably for a different day. But I wonder if that's a cool topic to think about for a different day. Is what happens when you distinguish your show or your script or your podcast as fiction, and what does that do to people's expectation for what you then say, for what is then okay to put out there, because we have distinguished it as fiction? And why haven't some of our news networks maybe done the same thing already?
Oh my God.
Taking shots. First thing this morning. Which leads us right into privacy. And I want to start with a hot and bothered question. Is it ethical to keep anything private? Because I have thought a lot about this question in particular. Why would we keep anything private? Does it matter to us as consumers more than it does as podcasters, as media creators? When does it shift from, I don't want people to know about me, to I want to know what these people are doing when I can't see them? Any hot takes on that question? Because that one strikes me all the time, is when do we shift from a business person that wants to maybe keep some things behind closed doors to a consumer that has questions and wants answers?
I think if you characterize it as a consumer / business person question, you're on the right track, Trevor. But there's a lot that is really just personal privacy. For example, do you want the whole world knowing about what medicine you take, or what illnesses you may have been diagnosed, or what kind of grades you got in middle school, or if you were disciplined at a job or something like that? We have certain categories of information that is recognized as private under the law. And even though we as podcasters aren't subject to the HIPAA law or the FERPA, the Federal Education Records Law, things like that, we still should, I think, respect people have boundaries, and that's really what privacy is, I think.
Absolutely. I think about it from a different perspective. Obviously, I am a woman, and my personal safety and privacy of my well-being is something that I've always thought about, regardless of whether or not I'm behind a microphone or not. I mean, this was something that, at least in my household, as a woman in this world, you have to be aware of all the things. And you are, at least in my household, I was taught about being incredibly mindful of my personal safety, and privacy to me is personal safety. I don't want people to find me. I don't want to know people ahead of time where I'm going to be. And I'm saying as a whole, right? And also with the things that I'm posting, like I think I mentioned this in conversations before, it is my right for me to know just where I am from and the kind of information that I put out online, especially as it pertains to location and my general behavior. Now, I'm very mindful about that. It's a little bit harder when somebody else outs you and you don't want them to, because it's one of those things, like we might be talking inside of a podcast or something, and one of the key questions that comes out all the time is like, oh, where are you from? Or like, where do you live? Right. And I tend to be very general about my responses. Like I live in North Carolina, right? That's a big, it's a state.
Yeah.
I don't usually go like in this little town, but yes, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm just gonna say, so we're not going to publish your address in the or mine for that matter.
No.
But because you get the stalker issue and so on. The law actually recognizes several different flavors of privacy, and so I'll just real quickly run down through those. There's private information, the data privacy. We've all seen the check boxes and the cookie consents that we have to do when we log onto a certain website. And there's a lot of issues in data privacy under GDPR and California's privacy law. And it's too much to get into the weeds of that, but there's a lot to be dealt with there. And the information about who you are and what you pay attention to and things is very useful in the ad world. And I'd say even as a consumer, I'd rather see ads for things I actually am relevant to me than I don't need ads for feminine products, right? So so there's that. So that's the data privacy. Then there's a solitude and seclusion. That's the kind of thing you were talking about, Elsie. We all have certain expectations that there are zones in our lives that we are not going to be fully exposed to the world. And whether, the scope of what that expectation is and whether it's reasonable is how the law sort of addresses it. So you have a different level of privacy in your bathroom at home than when you're walking down a public street. You don't expect that you're going to be photographed without your knowledge out in your bathroom, but out on the street, it's sort of fair game. That's public. And so the law has drawn these lines in a sort of fuzzy way. But it comes down to what is offensive to a reasonable person. If you were going to sue somebody, the jury would be asking that question: what is an offensive cross of the line?
Is that pretty frequent? Is that a pretty frequent question that comes up?
You don't see those lawsuits happening very, very often, but they do come up. And as someone who has studied this and taught this, I can tell you cases going back to the 1920s and 30s of people being photographed or intruded upon their seclusion and privacy. So that's what we historically have thought of as invasion of privacy, where somebody comes into your space and photographs you or just to interview you or just really look at what you're doing. There's the information privacy, like the kinds of information I was talking about earlier, educational and medical and employment and sexual histories and sexual practices. And if you don't want to be necessarily the whole world to know if you have trouble in the bedroom or something like that. That's private, right? Certain things feel private. And there's a legal claim called public disclosure of private facts. There's another one called false light, where you're talking about a person, but in a way that presents them falsely. And then there's the misappropriation of a person's likeness or their name or other personal attributes that is then used for a commercial purpose. And that bleeds over into another area of the law called the right of publicity. So back in I want to say right around the turn of the 20th century, the two, very respected judges, justices, and law professors at the time wrote an article, and they defined privacy as the right to be left alone. And yeah, that's sort of what was meant, or 100 years ago by privacy. But now we live in a world where people's expectation is very, very different. And if I ask my students in a college class, what do you think is private? Their answer will be very different and much less inclusive of things than I, growing up in the late 20th century, would perceive as private information. And I think we're what's the word I'm looking for? Eating away at the scope of privacy for most of us these days.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
that's very challenging, I feel, our understanding of what that means. And I have a feeling there's going to be, especially for your students, as they grow older, and even the younger, even prior to that, that there's going to be one of those things where that whole privacy thing might actually like, catapult all the way back, where it's going to be like, no, this is like the lines will be, no, this is mine, that is yours, because they'll start to figure out, my God, my loss, right? My loss of those intimate times where I wish I would not have been so public.
Yeah, I had those same questions. What is mine and what is everyone else's? And how does, you've touched on that, Gordon, and that sort of fits into both questions. What is mine and what everyone else's? And this is, I know, something important that Elsie brought up weeks and weeks ago, but what is private to my employer? Because that's a different kind of privacy that I've thought a lot about, because I worked as a director of operations for 3.5 years. I'm fortunate to have my own companies now. And so I have a dueling perspective at times, a tripling perspective, because there's the tripling of I'm a marketer and I need feedback in order to hopefully provide a good product, which you mentioned. And I think we can all acknowledge from a business perspective, we do look for feedback, and that is a sort of exchange of information at times when you ask for it. Then there's the version where you are the founder, the owner, or the responsible party for a business and all the employees. So what do I as an employer have access to, and what is private for my employees? When someone is representing me, do I have access to their messages? And what messages does that include? Does it include emails and text messages and private messages? Elsie, you've come up with Libsyn, of course, in the industry, and seen your business grow, I would think, quite a bit with Libsyn. Has that changed and evolved over time for you as a staff member? And have you seen that craft into your world at all, where you all talk about what Libsyn, for instance, or what an employer has access to? And how do you feel about that as an employee? Because that's a really fine line that doesn't get talked about nearly as much, especially in small business, I think.
Yeah. I think that I have a very unique point of view, because when I started, especially with the whole podcasting thing, I was a very early adopter, especially when it came to social media. The way that we interacted with employees and being an employee of somewhere was not quite as public as in the past. And also, it's not like, if you work, like, let's say at PNC Bank or in the local grocery store, it doesn't, most of us don't really care. But for businesses like Libsyn, which is in support of digital creators who happen to be online a lot of the time, and podcasters are obviously broadcasting or distributing their content out into the world, it behooves people to be in front of things, right? And so I was on social for a long time, and then companies at that time did not really have social channels. I was at the ground floor when companies started to create social channels, and I created the social channels for Libsyn before that was even a thing. So this was like way back, way back. And I know it feels like that has always been a thing, but that's what happened, right? And there was no manager of social channels for a business there because that didn't exist before. So there's been this co-creation that has happened in this space. And at first it was very clear, very like matter of fact, very much like this is Lipson, this is me. And there was a sense of personality that came with growing a channel because you can't really remove the person out of the channel, especially at its creation. But I have seen the fact that now um, social clout is an asset that businesses want access to. And it's something they look at when they are hiring you or offering a job or as a level of expertise, if you will, if you do have a strong channels, especially if you're working for entertainment, media, that kind of a stuff, that type of a company. I'm not sure where I fall on that because I know that there are, and this is what I fight with, like every day I think about this. There are many people who are very adept at being online and speaking their truth and being additive to conversations and are super smart. And there's also possibly an even more people that are not vocal on social,
Mm.
that are not writing on Twitter or LinkedIn or all of these places. And they're just as incredibly talented and they're not being seen or heard. And so I'm in a position right now where I really lean towards not having to be so forward facing all the time, telling everybody how I feel about all the things. And but I also, and so I haven't, but then I also see how it's been detrimental to, I think, I can't say clout because it's not the clout that I'm thinking here. It's more about leadership, thought leadership, ideas, analysis, other points of view, things that I often look back and go, I know. I know exactly what's going on here, but I really don't want to be bothered with writing it on social because I have work to do. I have things to take care of right now. But I also see that there are other people who are investing the majority of their time and attention on being public, and it's great for their benefit in terms of professional development. And I'm torn. I'm torn about that. And I'm also torn about the access of a company to what I've built myself. And I tend to try to stick because my brand as a personal brand is so specific. I try to split things as much as I can. So I really I will of course publish things on my feed that are my work related stuff, but I don't make it another channel for the business that I work for. It is additive to my work, but it's not something that I do like if I share something on the Lipson channel, I don't immediately like put something on mine too. It doesn't work that way. But it's rough. It's
Yeah.
hard.
Makes sense.
Yeah. You know, in the entertainment industry, the media industries, the companies are getting very savvy to what you were talking about, Elsie. And in fact, it isn't uncommon for an actor who's being hired to be on a movie to be sort of told, dictated by the employer, hey, while you're working on this movie and until it comes out, here's what you can and can't say. They'll have
Mm,
non-disclosure agreements and things like that, but they'll even be very specific about the exact content of the messaging that needs to go out on social media, and don't say anything else about the shoot. If you're having, there have been a few cases of an actor having a bad day on a film set and then ranting about it on their Twitter, and then their fans all decide, well, then I'm not going to go see that dang movie. You know, those kinds of things. If they're treating you that way,
yeah.
I don't want to have any part of it. And so it can have is the personal stuff can have an impact on the business side of things. And so as a lawyer, we're being asked to write these clauses and address it that way. And the other way, you know, it goes the other way too. You know, people sometimes they're the company they work for starts to reflect badly on them because of its public face
Mhm.
and things, and people start to be tarred with the brush, I guess you could say.
It is, and it's incredibly challenging. I think that that's something that I was not ready for that. I was not ready for being clumped into things, and I think that it is really hard to have an independent like just to not be like, I was just thinking about larger corporations, and I'm only using this name, mind you, I'm only using Apple because they're so huge, right? And so and actually Spotify too, because there's been times when like Spotify has made a decision that isn't possibly the most positive that we feel. We have feelings about a decision Spotify has decided to do. And then immediately we clump every human that works at Spotify into the company, and we somehow tarnish them, but they may or may not have anything to do with it. They may be equally upset by it.
Mhm.
And that is, it is so, I think it's so frustrating because there's times when I just want to say, this was a business decision by leadership, which you can go and be upset about or whatever, but it's not reflective of the humans that are doing the work. Sometimes they just they have to do what they have to do and may not have any kind of influence on what whatever leadership is doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How would someone know that? How would, and that kind of comes back to the privacy piece, is like, as a consumer, if you are not let into the company's doings, you are left to assume the organization and the individuals are one and the same as a consumer, right? Because we have the upside of, I think the three of us have worked in multiple realms in the supply chain, let's call it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we split that out, where is the appropriate place for a company to get the information, or the employee? Because if you want to establish that, somebody would need to explicitly say that. Otherwise, by working at the company, I think by signing the contract and continuing to work there, you have, and not aided and abetted is an exaggeration, but you're there and you can choose to walk out anytime. And I think that we've seen that in history with extreme examples, obviously. But where does the burden lie on the company to maybe, if we had our way, would they tell everyone that and flip it to where, like, we as individuals have to say, these views and perspectives may not reflect those of the company I work for. Like, we hear those kind of disclosures. Why don't we get the opposite from the company? Or should we get the opposite from a company, that we make these decisions and some of our employees hate us? How would they get that across, I guess, Elsie? And Gordon, if you have a take on this too, I don't know how you would get that across, because it is an organization and that's what we sign up for to some extent.
I don't think you can really. I mean, business is business. You know, you make decisions. Business. I think business is business. You know, and there's we were just discussing in one of our other episodes about all kinds of legalities, and not like everything is so fuzzy. That's why we have this show. There is no cut and dry answer to anything that we're doing, right? And every single choice that is made has all of these other fuzziness that goes along with it. And unfortunately, the way that business is run, sometimes there's no room for all of the stuff that you're talking about, Trevor, especially with larger organizations, because messaging is so very important. There's a lot of people that are involved in creating messaging and communicating that information to other folks, and there's times when they don't have maybe the right person, or they don't have time to be trying to communicate all of that stuff to everybody, right? It's just, there are thousands of people involved in companies. So yeah.
The best I think we can do is the word we've been throwing around a lot is transparency. I think we just have to strive to be as transparent as possible when we are representing a company or when we're not. And it's the same, the disclosure about the advertising or the endorsements. As individuals, we are always endorsing the messaging and the branding of the companies we work for or represent, and vice versa. And when we want to distance ourselves from that for whatever reason, I think we just have to try to say so. But it's never going to be a perfect solution. All we can do is try.
And on to add to the mix also is if you tie in power and privilege to a lot of that conversation as well, then you start to really see how that plays into the scene. There are some folks who honestly, they need to be at this job. they need to be at this job. There is no option. You can always walk out the door. It's easier for very easy for people to make that judgment. Oh, they could just go get another job. You do not know, especially how hard a lot of underrepresented communities here are have it in the mix. They need to be dealing with their families. And to me, that day-to-day kind of a thing here, this is a lifeline for me. I don't want to get involved with this stuff. I'm sorry these folks are doing these these problems here, but I honestly don't have the choice to go find another job. That is a situation there's many people that have to deal with, right? I mean, so much at stake when it becomes like health insurance, mortgages, like kids, sick parents. We need to understand the humanity of people and why they make the choices that they make.
Well, I think that's true for business though too, Elsie. I would say in response to that is I totally hear what you're saying. Not a judgment at all on somebody that can't, because get that. And also when it comes to the ethical portion of this, that is the way to hold in the social. Somebody's got to hold these businesses accountable. And so, yes, not everybody can. And to your point, that is why we have these conversations, at least in part, is because hopefully some of us, maybe not all of us, but some of us are in a position to guide this discussion, to have a role at the table. When we do get to the table, what are we going to do with that opportunity to make a difference? And I think that is where it kind of comes in with the privacy, because as Gordon is seeing with AI on the floor there are a lot of questions and there are not a lot of answers coming from businesses right now, because businesses are tech companies are cutting employees, presumably filling it in with AI, as we've talked about in this show. And I think that it's going to come down to businesses and those of us that work with them. Hot take. We are going to have to work on some of the disclosure pieces so not everything is so private. Because I think, yes, as individuals, we get a right to be private, but I think as an organization, as a public-facing organization, you have to let that stuff out. I think we've talked about transparency as the antidote, and I agree wholeheartedly. It's a role, I think, of the organization, not necessarily the individuals. But the individuals do make the organization. Organizations don't operate by a computer most of the time. So I think we have to get involved and interject us a little bit. Amy has to say, oops, I took down the wrong one. She says, I definitely don't want people to find stuff about my business. Amy's in a cool spot with her business because she is only recently a business person. So this is a very new and relevant and topical conversation for her, because she's recently moved from strictly a podcaster in the last couple of years to actually having a growing business where the podcast is part of her brand. So she is in the thick of navigating this. And I think she does a pretty good job, but there's a lot more questions than answers, as I think we've discussed. But organizations, it's got to be the people that can. Do you agree with that, at least in principle, is that the organizations have to be the ones and the individuals have to drive that organization? Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I think it's only because of the fact that so I'm going to ask a question of you. Where is this transparency? Where is this communication happening?
That's the right question.
Like where
should it happen?
No, wait, where is it? Right. Where is it happening? Who is it? A letter? Is it on social? Is it an email? Is it like where is it going to be disclosed? Where is this transparency happening?
I think anywhere. I think it's got to start somewhere, because the only other option is that it doesn't go anywhere.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But what I'm telling you is that I'm looking at the logistics of it, right? I'm looking at the actual, like, whose job is this going to be?
The company. I mean, they have
communications you're saying
people,
the company,
right?
But whose job in the company? Who's gonna be hired to do this?
Yeah, that's going to be different for every organization. But me, as the leader of my organization, I think it's incumbent upon me to get those messages out and to build structures in my brand that hopefully take account for that transparency. In my case, I do a lot of things live, and I don't really hold anything back. I hold myself to that early, and it's easy when I'm small. I think for a larger organization, you have PR people, you have marketing people, you have branding people. All of those things are the ones I think of. The people who are outwardly facing are the ones who deliver that message. That's my initial take. Isn't that why we have PR?
That is, but I guess I'm getting to a lot of the time, the majority of the outrage, because that's what tends to happen. The outrage around the world is like, why did you do this? You know, oh my God. And where does this outrage happen? On social. And people are getting these social profiles are getting hammered with requests and things, right? Who is running those social channels? Usually it's like it's either outsourced to a social company. Sometimes it's a lot of interns that run that. Once in a while you do have like, yeah, but the people who are actually running the social is not going to be the CEO. It's not going to be anybody in leadership. It's not going to be anybody with
But
any power
they set
usually.
direction though, right?
Yeah, of course, but that's not. But then you usually have the most powerless people running communication as the brand. And the logistics around that is astounding. You should definitely follow there's this incredible Twitter, I think it's called Social Tea. I think it's called Social Tea. And it's a fantastic, sarcastic, anonymous account where people send in their complaints of what's being required of them by both their own companies and people working with social. And when you read that, all I do is every time I read that, I always end up going, yep, yep. It's like they're dropping truths out there. So
Yeah.
it's like you have the most powerless, like you don't have the weaponry, if you will, to properly communicate, because those are not the people that are behind the social
Well,
channels.
I don't disagree with you. I will say before we move on though, I think it's important that if it's not the CEO's job and if it's not the company's job to direct those conversations, then it's no one's job. Because I think that's what leadership is. You have to set that. I realize it's not easy, but I also think that none of this is, right?
Well, Trevor,
yeah.
it's easy to say, hey, CEO should direct the
Right.
the the general communications manager or someone should direct
Whoever's
the
responsibility
conversation.
it is.
But wait, let me finish. But when the 20-year-old kid just out of college or still in college, who is the quote social media manager for a company, is getting pushback from the public and has to respond in almost real time, that it doesn't matter what the CEO said the direction is, and they may not have the life experience to.
How does it not matter though?
Oh my, it does matter. What I'm telling you, it's
I
the
didn't say it doesn't
time,
matter.
Trevor. It doesn't. It matters, but the time. It's like most of this time is happening at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night. Is when the world always comes to an end on social. And you have a 20-year-old.
And
I'm using. Yeah, you have a 20-year-old person who's trying to figure all this stuff out. What do they do
and the
next?
news cycle has happened
And
before
then
the
you
CEO ever sees
exactly. And if you write something because you're thinking you're doing a good job, and you're like, I'm just gonna say whatever,
now
like, and
the
they're doing it out of the best of their heart. That could actually be taken, that screenshot, put somewhere on the news. Look at what the account said, and they're like, "That's not what I meant.
Good.
I didn't have the people." No, I didn't have no, but I didn't have the support. Like, Trevor, you don't understand. I'm telling you,
the he
man.
doesn't speak for the company
He
message,
doesn't speak for
Well,
the company.
I hear what you're saying. I
but he
agree. I
does if
agree
he'd
with
love to,
everything.
but he really,
And guess who's gonna lose their
Yeah.
job?
Sure. I
The
mean,
kid.
Well, the question on the
I
screen
completely agree.
is
I
interesting.
think if it's not the organization's responsibility for privacy, but it's the individuals, then I don't know how we ever disclose that. I understand everything you're saying. Completely feel that.
Yeah.
I've worked in companies of varying size. I've helped start companies. I think it is much easier when you start to set that precedent, which is why I love this show so much. Partly why I wanted to do this show is because I wanted to try to set the precedent for my companies to have these conversations early, because I think it's easy. Go ahead, Gordon.
Well, the question on the screen brings up the other side of this. When it is the CEO doing the communication,
Oh
you
my
end up in a
gosh, yes.
situation where the
Mhm.
CEO, who definitely does speak for the company, I'm thinking of a particular very large social
Me
media company
too.
right
I
now,
hear yes, absolutely. I'm thinking
and
about him as well.
and he says something, tweets something stupid or something that's just very one-sided politically or something like that, and then the whole rest of the company has to scramble to tell us what he really meant, or to spin it so the company's stock doesn't go into the toilet. So there again, no good solutions other than to be more moderated in the making of the messaging in the first place. And also,
Yeah.
I think it's incumbent on us all to take the time. So what if people on social are ranting about a problem? The company doesn't have to wade in until it has figured out its message. Now, that may be a less authentic response to the struggle that they're dealing with, but it's also going to be, and now we're advising companies on how to message. But we live in this, and this actually goes to one of Amy's earlier questions. Is it because of the internet that everything is so gray? It's not the internet per se, it's the speed.
Exactly. I was just going to say that it's the speed. It's because a lot of us don't have the time. And also, if somebody's going through something very personal as well, um, that's happening, even
Hmm.
like company or not company, I don't need to respond to your desires of wanting to know how I'm doing. Right?
Right.
There's like a huge scandal happening in like real what is those TVs, the TV shows like that are like the housewives and
Yeah.
all of that, like whatever, reality TV. There's like a massive thing happening on
Mhm.
reality TV of a show that I happen to have gotten into during the pandemic. It's called
Yeah.
Vanderpump Rules. And so there is a huge, I mean, it's a massive scandal. I'm sure you guys will see it now, and if you
Mhm.
haven't already. And it was cheating and affairs and all kinds of weird stuff, and everybody's astounded, and I'm like, and everybody wants to know what's happening, how are they doing, how is the woman affected doing, and all this stuff. And it's like, gosh darn it, if I had just found out that my partner of 10 years had been cheating on me for 7 months with like my best friend, I would not want to be answering to anyone.
Well, more
And so to
importantly,
your point, yeah, sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
more importantly, how about just respect the privacy and let us work it out, and then we'll come back and tell
Exactly.
you,
Yes. And so to
you
your
know?
point there, I mean, you're asking whether or not, Trevor, if I have to be authentic and I have to be transparent and we have to let everybody know what they're doing, and I do it in front of folks, but it's like, you know what? There's a lot of stuff that's incredibly painful. And I know for me, I was taught, especially as a teacher, as a yoga teacher for many years, and I haven't done that in a while. When you take up space and you're teaching people and you're guiding folks and you are guiding them into um oftentimes very vulnerable positions, and I'm talking literally and also emotionally, you don't have the time. Your responsibility is to take up the best space that you can as a teacher and leader and be solid, because I'm taking care of humans right now. I'm making sure energetically I'm there for them. It is totally irresponsible of me to get in front and teach a yoga class or teach anybody at that moment if I'm in a level of turmoil where I cannot get my shit together in my own head. Right? So if I'm sitting there trying to pretend and I'm doing a good job as an actor, but I'm not there, I should not be taking the seat of the teacher that day. And that's why we need space.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
that's the same thing that we do when we get behind the mic.
Yeah.
I'm behind the mic here. If I can speak eloquently and clearly about issues that are happening with me, I want to be as authentic as I can at that time, but that doesn't give you the right to ask me to do it before I'm ready. And what there's a line there of these companies need to be authentic and getting out there. Companies also have energy. They also have to figure their own, stuff out. They also have to talk amongst themselves. There are lots of human beings who need to have conversations behind the scenes, and that doesn't happen. I remember specifically with one of my coworkers, we worked on an email for 2 days. to get the right messaging on this because we knew it was so important. Back and
That's
forth,
rare.
going like, oh my God, we have to do this. But the thing is, though, what would you have wanted? You know what we're gonna get? Why
It's
didn't you
perfect.
respond? Why didn't you respond sooner?
Yeah.
Why did it take 2 days? What? And so it's like, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
It takes
there are
time.
times when you shouldn't be refining that message in public. And if you had sent out the
Yes.
first draft email, you would have had a lot of pushback and feedback, and then you would have had to respond, and it would have been a whole thing, and it would have been back and forth, and it would have been 10 days rather than
Yep.
2 days before you finally got clarity of what the real message was and how the audience was perceiving it and all those kinds of things. So can privacy be detrimental to society and culture? Yeah, I think it can. I also think it's probably a good thing in the long run to have and respect some degree of privacy. Now, I will say publicly traded companies, businesses of a certain scale, where it's not just a one person face of a business, things are going to come out. And once they're out, you do have to address them. And so claiming, no, that's private, leave it alone, isn't going to work. But when it's
I don't know that it's required. I think we have a much broader scale of transparency in our culture than certainly in my memory. And I don't want to pick on the last president, but certainly we decided how we, the government's probably been doing it for a long, long time. And that's a different topic about what they do with transparency or lack thereof and privacy. But and I don't want to go super down that rabbit hole, but I do think that everything has been skewed. Like, what is truth? What are metrics? What are measurements? Like, everything is, it kind of gets lost eventually if we stay too close to our own bubble, which is why it is so fun to play outside of our bubble sometimes and just consider all the different things, because it has felt at times over the past few years in particular, I think that we've sort of lost touch at times because we have solopreneurs everywhere. You mentioned of a certain size. And the truth is that everybody that registers an LLC, whether they're a multinational, that's not completely true, but organizations as organizations, once you register as an LLC, you are treated as a person, and you get a lot more flexibility. So I do maintain that I think it's good to keep pressure on organizations, because if they can't handle the pressure, they may be in the wrong space, truthfully, or they're just not prepared. And sometimes, and I realize that that's a big, broad statement. It's not very nice. But if companies don't protect us, I don't trust the government to. So I think it's got to be business. Like, from a privacy perspective, I think business and money can drive those decisions.
Yeah. Just to sort of put a cap on this, I just want to mention there are some situations also where people are not allowed to talk about things, legally or ethically, whatever. As a lawyer, I'm not allowed to talk about what's going on with my clients until they talk about it, or if they author it up. There's always, again, gray areas, fuzzy areas, but the general rule, lawyers, doctors, we are held to a certain standards of privacy. And even if it's the president's health or the CEO of the company, has a legal issue or something like that, that's off limits, and so that level of privacy, again, maybe it's not so good for society. It's in the public interest that this information get out there, but this is where journalists come in. Go find it somewhere else, because I'm not going to tell you. Anyway, I think that's all I wanted to say about that aspect of it. We've got a
Elsie,
lot of other.
I want to know, I know we're getting close on time and we got to go. Elsie, though, I want to get your take on times that it could be detrimental to be private, for whether that's as an individual or as a business. Can you think of an instance where it could be detrimental to society as a whole, or to society or a group to hold things too close?
Oh my God. I have to say, Trevor, this question to me is like a hard no, because like one of my big sort of values and ethics and ethical things is privacy. And it's like I hold that. You should see, like, when whenever a new year starts, you always like sit there and like ponder about the word of the year or the theme that you want to like go with and whatever. Almost every single time I'm looking back, it's privacy for me. It's been privacy. So, oh my gosh, I think my house is on fire. So anyway, for me, I don't think so, because I do feel like as a person, no, but I'm going to shut up because the something's happening in the house.
That's perfect. Nothing like a hot take with a smoke alarm going off in the background. That was timely. No, that was perfect. I put it out there because it is a hot question, and because it is so broad that I think it is nice to play once in a while in things that are really close to us. And I love what you said about it being ours. And I think that is kind of what I'm taking away from today, from both of you, and from our whole week of conversation about this, and the weeks leading up, and the weeks that will come. I'm sure we'll keep it alive. But that it's the entity, that it's the person, that it's the individual. We have all these different separations of who could be private and what could be private. And I think that who oftentimes defines that, because we have individuals, we have groups like churches and community groups, we have governments, we have organizations, we have all these different layers of people who could choose to disclose or not disclose. So I love playing in the realm as we switch between our hats, what does it look like? And what Elsie is saying is, in all my hats, privacy is critical and important. And that is hopefully why we talked about it today, which I'm very excited about. We are getting close to wrapping. Gordon, I know your computer is...
No, I got plugged in now. I'm good to go. So
we're good to go. So I want to bring in our editor-in-chief, Bree, to find out. Bree, do you want to run the Gordon clip now? And because Gordon did some walking interviews. Gordon, you're here.
Yeah,
you did some walking interviews.
Yeah, when I got here to Evolutions, and mostly the first day or two of the conference, I decided to just get out my phone and ask people some questions about what they think about ethics. And we've been talking a lot about ethics on our show, and should we have some kind of a code of ethics in the podcasting space? So, here's what people had to say about some of that.
Sir, my name is Evo Terra.
And what's your name? Juvie. Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions on camera?
Yeah, go for it.
Real quick. Are you a podcaster?
Yes, I am.
What's your show about?
The My 5 Cents Podcast. It's a family debate show where we take top 5 lists, debate amongst each other, and it's the only podcast where the guest becomes the judge.
Hello, my name is Prince DJ, and I have a podcast called The Big D Don't. You can check it out at escapetobigdcountry.com, escapetobigdcountry.com. And right now, this is my very first podcast, Moving Evolution.
Hi, I'm Jennifer with Bourbon Barrel Podcasting.
So we're at...
Hi, my name is Angel Perez, and my podcast is We Fix Real Estate.
What do you...
George Suero. My podcast is My Superpower Podcast.
Hi, I'm Allison from the Allison in Wonderland Mental Health Podcast. And
My name is Toby Goodman, and my company is Listening Better Marketing. You can find me actually at narrowpodcasting.com. I have a book all about how to use your podcast to get clients rather than...
I'm Alexander from The Art of Recording. I'm an audio engineer. I do a lot of editing and things like that, and that's what my company is.
What do you see as the role of ethics in podcasting?
We have continued to see what a role media in general plays in all of our lives these days, and we're all oftentimes as viewers or readers of that media struggling with, what are the ethical questions of the things I'm watching, and should this stuff be out there? As podcasters, guess what? We're media too. So for us, we need to really make sure that everything we are doing adheres to ethics, whether that's our own ethics or a set of code of conduct for the businesses or whomever we're representing. But yeah, ethics is here and hopefully to stay, which I consider a good thing.
there needs to be there needs to be a lot of education on how to speak about things in the mental health industry, and that extends to podcasters since such a young generation are the ones listening to it and getting that information.
Ooh, that is a great question, because I think ethics ties into morale, not morale, but morals. Your morals, your own moral code. And it's all dependent on your moral code. So if your moral code is, I can say this and be okay with it, then yeah, you're working within your own personal ethics. Now, to be able to make that a broad law across all podcasts, I think it would be challenging and difficult, but I can understand the pros and the cons behind it.
All right.
I think it's a very important question because, for example, recently there's been a lawsuit about artificial intelligence and about advertising a podcast that isn't very inclusive and very ethically forward.
So there's a lot of issues with that, and when you fill up the airwaves with this negativity, then it affects the other podcasts, because now there's an issue that we have to tackle. There's currently I don't know if the lawsuit is still going on, but the lawsuit would basically target the suggestions that YouTube can make, because now they would be liable to suggestions that they make.
Yeah,
you have ethical considerations of what you edit and what you don't edit out. If you're going to change the meaning of what they're saying,
wedding and portrait
is that ethical?
So it's not like landscape
in podcasting. I believe there's got to be some sort of etiquette in terms of like how we can protect our own podcasting and how we engage with others, so that we can come across a little bit more ethical. And that way we can protect ourselves and others. And so therefore it creates a sort of, it protects our own brand.
I believe it purely depends on what your podcast is. If it's about aquariums, no, I don't believe there should be a lot of deep ethics conversations about it, because that's not what you're there for. It purely depends, like hers with mental health, I can see where ethics would come in, but it depends purely on what your podcast is.
But the integrity of maintaining the meaning of what you're editing from the podcast editor's perspective.
Awesome.
So.
And you're promoting a particular brand. Do you think you owe it to people to talk about the fact that you have a relationship, or?
I don't really care what your relationship with the company is, as long as you believe that you're selling a good product, that they're selling a product that's good.
Whether they're paying you or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
I personally
unless you just don't think it is a good product, then I don't think you should.
Don't like it, don't endorse it.
Yeah.
And I very carefully do not choose endorsements that I feel like they follow the mental health advocacy that I'm working on. I don't want to have episodes about one thing with a very contradictory advertisement.
Okay. Thanks. Should we, as a community, be working on some kind of a code of ethics for podcasting?
Ooh, a code of ethics for podcasting. That sounds hard.
It's a beautiful thing that podcasting is the Wild West, and I also think it's potentially quite a dangerous thing. So having a place where there's some accountability and some rules around behaviour and best practices and being a good human is a good idea. So
I think you have to be really careful when you establish these rules and regulations, these legislations where you try to control the media, because who's to say that you're being discriminatory by abolishing a certain type of speech, but on the other hand, then there should be limits to that. So it's a very tricky subject. It's not
I think if any podcast is being ran as a professional business, then I think it absolutely makes sense that a well-drafted code of ethical conduct is a smart thing to do. Individuals, you can probably play that little fast and loose by yourself, but I think for any business taking it seriously, absolutely.
Podcasting in general, I think that it is the wave of the future. I think a lot of shows are going to be, even if they are doing podcasting, a lot more shows will be coming into podcasting. So, yeah, podcast is the wave of the future, and I grew in love with podcasts. That's what I'm still doing. And then when I started coming to these podcasting conventions, I meet a lot of podcast movement. That's why I love Evolutions now, and that's why I love Podfest. I mean, if I had my way, I'll be married to both.
That was fun.
Oh, thank you so much for getting those, Gordon. Those were so lovely. I've watched them probably 50 times a piece now, and I love them still.
Great job, Gordon. I asked the question,
Thanks.
what did you use? Because we as podcasters, I'm always like, how'd you do that? How'd you do that? What did you use? What's the hard stuff? You know, the whatever. What's called
The tech?
Yeah, the tech. What's the tech?
I had my iPhone, and I have a little shotgun microphone that I can plug into it, and it's just a little vlogging rig, and it actually worked better than I expected. Mostly, little some of the neighboring sounds coming in and things, but But I thought it worked out great. The
That's
iPhone is a
awesome.
fantastic camera.
It's
Media
awesome. It's
creation in
so
your
good.
pocket. Yeah.
Absolutely. Looks great. So good job, Gordon. That's amazing.
Well,
So
thanks. You know, the thing
yeah.
I take away from watching it, and thank you for cutting it together, Trevor. The editing was
Yeah.
a big part of that too. The diversity of what people are podcasting about is really that
Yep.
is the heart of this medium, and it's what makes it
Exactly.
such a wonderful,
So
powerful
good.
tool. And I'm just every time I come to these conferences and I talk to people, and there's the mental health one, and the editor, and the person who's talking about basket weaving in Timbuktu or whatever it is. That diversity gets me excited, and it recharges my batteries, and it's part of why I come to these conferences. So
Yeah.
if you're
So
not
good.
doing this, by the way, everybody should try to get to some of them, because you have so much
She
fun and you meet
podcast
so many
live.
great
She
people.
podcast
Yeah.
live. She podcast live. I know. We have to get people there. I don't think people understand what a life-changing thing it is to attend conferences. And I have to just, I mean, go to She Podcast Live, June, buy your tickets. But also just to bring all of this stuff back, it's like the reason that I'm working in podcasting is because of a podcast conference. It's because I attended podcast conferences that I got a job, essentially, because I showed up live. I showed up live. That's it. Way back in the day, I showed up live. The relationships that you make there are far more worth the investment to be able to show up live, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, great. Yeah, She Podcast Live, it looks to be a fantastic conference, and
Thank you.
there are others, of course. The
Mhm.
big podcast movement, the larger conference, I should say.
It's in Denver.
Podcast Movement Evolutions is a little more oriented at the tech side, not the tech side, the business side of the podcasting industry, and the platforms and the networks and that kind of stuff, and a little more Hollywood facing, to be really honest. The
Mhm.
Podcast Movement main conference is happening in Denver this summer, and it is you should come. Everybody should
Mhm.
come. Meanwhile, between now and then, the Podfest Global virtual conference is
Mhm.
happening later this month, March. I think it starts on March 27th, and you can go to podfestexpo.com, I think is the website, and find out a little more about that. And yeah, I mean, I think attending these kinds of things is really a good energy boost for podcasting and creating, and you'll learn a lot and meet a lot of good people, and who, as you said, you get a job. Who knows where the next connection, or you find your next guest or sponsor or whatever. It's great.
Yeah,
Enough
take
about
a
that.
role in the conversation. Take a
Yeah.
leadership role in the conversation. Is always what I come away
Oh.
with.
Yeah,
Is my
and
volume working?
you're okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and come to my workshop on March 27th. The Business and Legal Fundamentals for
Yep.
Podcast Growth and Profit is a workshop I do 4 or 5 times a year, and I share a lot of information to help podcasters and creators learn how to do some of the legal stuff for themselves, so they don't have to hire lawyers and pay out thousands and thousands of dollars to get it done. So I hope you come and join that. That's at event.podcastlaw.net. I always have to
You're like
remember. Just click on take a picture of the QR code on the
QR
screen.
code, yeah. So good. Yay. Oh my
Trevor's
gosh,
doing
it's
it
so
as we
funny.
speak.
Like I mean, you never know what's going to happen live. And yes, I did have a fire alarm in the house and had to leave. And that's like so weird how, you never know what's
Yeah. Just an alarm and not a fire.
just
right?
an alarm. Well, there was a little bit of a melted something, but not necessarily fire. So there was
Well, we're glad you're safe.
There was a thing.
So glad. I think Laura left the heat on when she left. So when your fire alarm was going off, I also felt warm, and I sort of like smelled something that didn't belong. So it was really interesting.
Gosh, you're like,
like what your brain does when
Yes.
senses sort of accidentally match up like that. I was like, oh man, she burned down the house. She didn't burn down the house. That's my job. I do stuff like that.
Funny
now,
story,
so.
as long as we're talking about fire alarms. Elsie, you probably remember a few years ago at Podfest in Orlando. Hot day out in the
I was in the middle of a session, but go
Yeah.
ahead.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
and the hotel fire alarm went off, and we all had to evacuate the hotel during the conference. And fortunately, it was only about 15 minutes, but we were standing out in the hot sun for that time, and fun memories of conference stuff. So
Mhm. That was crazy. We were
Yeah.
like, what is happening here? So yeah,
good times alive. I mean, again, I just want to reiterate, and as we wrap, go to live things. I want to reiterate what both of you said about being active in whatever way you can. If you can't get to the podcasts in different conferences, regardless of the format and the focus, there are so many options now with videos and being involved via streaming. And if you want to go to a conference and can't attend, see if they're going to stream and what they're going to stream. Usually they give some content. So,
and there are some scholarships. Sometimes people, companies will pay for a few people to come, and sometimes individuals will even sponsor people to come and things. And I try to get to as many of them as possible, and I know you guys do too. So if you do go to these conferences, look for us. Come up and say hello. We'd love to, meet you in person and have a human conversation, a real and disintermediated conversation. So
get involved. Get involved. That is the one big thing. Is if you, and we talk about every single time, is to be a part of the conversation, is to be a potential solution, is to have your voice included in that. It doesn't mean you get to control it. It doesn't mean it's yours. It doesn't mean you're right. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you get to have a place at that table. So finding someone to buddy up to who's maybe in the industry and asking how to get in. Someone like Elsie and Gordon are great resources if you want to be involved in some way, is to reach out and ask someone who you trust. And for those reasons, I'm so glad and appreciative of both of your times for being here with us, because I think it provides another connect point. And when people have another connection point, they see another side of what is otherwise an entity or otherwise is just a conference, or otherwise is just a speaker in front of everyone. I think it gives people more connection points, which hopefully will lead more people to be included. And in the case of podcasters, as I always say, I think that's such a good thing, because podcast industry as a whole has a great history of empowering people. And that's my word of the year. So you mentioned word of the year. Empowerment is my word of the year. I love the she vibes. I love the girl vibes, because it's empowerment for me. This is Fuzzy Lawgic. I am so proud to be a part of it with both of you, Gordon Firemark and Elsie Escobar, and all of the different things and places we represent and all the different hats we wear. To come together with both of you each Friday is truly an honor to have you here. Thank you so much to everybody who was in the chats with us today. Amy is always firing us up with questions and comments and reflections. We had people in YouTube and in Facebook and in Twitch today. We always have a couple people hanging out on Twitch, a couple people in YouTube and Facebook. And we are just so grateful for this experience, because otherwise, without everybody being a part of it, we're just talking in a vacuum. So I really appreciate all the engagement. And again, Gordon, big shout out to you for doing on the ground. And we'll see everybody next week for a recap, which I think we're all really excited about, because we all continue to do research after the episodes. So I cannot wait for next week's episode, where we get to reflect back and I'm sure get comments from our worlds and bring those to the live. We will see everyone next week on Friday at 8 a.m. for Fuzzy Lawgic. Thank you so much for being here. Bree, thank you so much for all you do in the background.